Smith is recognized as an innovator in the efficient acquisition of technology. He directs the annual acquisition of nearly $2.5 billion in technology, equipment, and services. Please welcome to the stage the United States Internal Revenue Service Deputy Chief Procurement Officer, Harrison Smith.
I mean, who knew that you would get excited about the federal acquisition regulation, right? But I do want to say thank you to Steve. He just gave me a promotion. Apparently I'm the CIO, so I like that. That's good. I hope that comes with a pay bump as well. So thanks to him for that. But again, thanks to Chrissy and to Don and to all the folks who have attended and the folks who have participated. This has been really useful and beneficial to me. But thank you the most to whoever did not schedule me after General Kelly, excuse me. That is a tough act to follow. One of the things that really resonated with me in regards to his speech was what his wife told him when the White House called. She said, "We are a family of service. That's what we do." And it struck me that when you have that kind of North Star guiding you, the noise behind decisions and the distractions, they become a little bit less. Decisions become a little bit more straightforward, a little bit easier. And for me, at least from a professional standpoint, my North Star for the past couple of years has been really understanding how important the business of government is, how important the support is we get from our industry partners, and knowing when to use the efficient approaches that we have in acquisition and procurement to move quickly. We have neither the time nor the money to move slowly on the things that are really important. We spend $500 million a year on goods and services. And some people will say, well, part of that's for the acquisition community, part of that's for the CFO community. And I want to highlight the fact that there are a lot of really important missions that people don't recognize and don't realize. At least 9D of you have given me a hard time about working for the Internal Revenue Service and the tax man cometh, and I got it, right? But I'm proud to work at the IRS. And I'm pretty sure that most of you don't know that last October, there was an article that came out in Forbes that highlighted a multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional raid of the largest dark web child pornography site in the world. And the IRS's Criminal Investigation Office was the lead on that. They're the ones who analyzed the blockchain. They're the ones who de-anonymized the Bitcoin transactions, which led to the capture of 7.5 terabytes of data, 10,000 CDs worth of child pornography. And perhaps just as, or even more importantly, the rescue of 23 minor children who were actively being exploited. So I bring this up, no, it's not the most positive of topics of all, but what we do here is important. What you do is important here. And understanding that we need to be efficient, informed, and insistent upon improving the systems that we use to support the mission of the government is wildly, wildly important. So I just wanted to show, I want to show this slide, please. Yep, thank you. So we joke about the FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulation, and I promise for those of you who have to take a work call in a second, 1, it's Saturday, you're a liar. 2, I'm not going to get down in the weeds, I promise. I promise. But this is something that my dad had up in his office when I was growing up. And he was a journalism professor for 35, 40 years. And it's really fascinated me. Has anybody ever seen this before? Anybody know what it is? I got a couple hands, right? So this is an individual, Charles Menard. It's a drawing from 1869, and it depicts the movement of Napoleon's army and the invasion into Russia. So in a 2-dimensional space, it conveys, I think it's 6 different sets of information. So the width of the line is how many troops there are. The direction is the direction, like they went in at the end of the graph on the far right, comes back out. It does temperature, it does latitude and longitude. It does all these things within 2 dimensions. And that was in 1869. So if we can't figure out how to do this now, we're in real trouble. So, Federal Acquisition Regulation is the set of regulations that governs our procurement structures. There are quite a few acts which add to this. There is the Truth in Negotiations Act, the Competition and Contracting Act, and the Federal Acquisition Streamlining Act. And for those of you who want to make a joke about federal acquisition and streamlining, we already did it for you because it's 167 pages long. I don't bring this up again to get down into the weeds, but the point is that TINA, 1962. SECA, 1984. FASA, 1994. The FAR, a couple thousand pages. Agency supplements, another couple hundred pages. And yet we have conversations about let's get rid of the FAR. There's a quote here from a member of the Defense Business Board, put a match to the FAR. It's complicated, it's convoluted, it's inconsistent. Pentagon itself said publicly that the DoD model is based on a lack of trust and that all we do is do oversight and we don't do accountability. These are real and legitimate concerns. And this is why we started to, within the procurement community, start to use non-FAR-based acquisitions. So you've got challenges, you've got the commercial solutions offerings, and you've got other transaction authorities. And we started to use these things more and more and more because we see the FAR frequently as the source of our problem. Here's the thing. DoD use of OTAs doubled from 2017 to 2018. And you know what's really not a surprise to me? Is we still have some of the same problems. So I'm struck when we start talking about let's get rid of the FAR, let's get rid of this, let's start over again. We've got what people will argue is a convoluted, over-documented process that takes too long, and we want to go back and do 5 or 10 years of legislation and work to create another over-documented process to fix the problems that we say we have. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty stupid. My book. Not saying that it's not helpful, but I get struck, and it reminds me of a conversation that I had with my children. I have 4 children. They're lovely, they're chaotic, they're complicated, but I love them dearly. There are occasional fights and arguments in my household, and when things like this come up, I say one or both of 2 things. 1, stop touching it. Stop picking the scab, get your finger out of your brother's eye. No, the dog is not a couch, get off of him. Be nice to your mother, stop touching it. And what's your problem? How can I help you? So what's our problem? Our problem is, next slide please. 4 problems. Whoops, can you back me up one? Thank you. How do I get innovative responses to my problem? In the government, we struggle with this. We struggle how to evaluate disparate approaches. But then we go and we create this 15, 20, 50, 150-page set of requirements about you have to do this in this order. And I need these types of people. And you can only charge me this much. And oh, by the way, of the 50 people that you're going to have on this project, 45 of them are key personnel. And I need their resumes. And I need a letter of commitment. And I'm not going to talk to you after the solicitation is out. And no, we're not going to negotiate. And no alternate proposals. And get off my lawn. We get old and cantankerous with this stuff, and we understand why we don't get innovative responses. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2, we need to decrease the cycle time. And a lot of people will legitimately start with, it takes too long to award a contract. And I'll be honest, I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means that it takes too long to generate a complicated set of requirements. It takes too long to blow off the old version of the solicitation and put it back out there again. Are you saying evaluations? I don't know what that means. And that's not the only cycle time that we should be concerned about. How do I decrease the cycle time and the amount of resources needed in order to make improvements with existing contracts? The number of times that we've said, great, I have a contract for 5 or 6 or 7 years, this is great, crap, I've got an unfunded mandate, and I have to pivot. Well, that's not in the contract, you can't do that. We struggle with that. Agile mindset. The number of times within, I'm just going to tell it how it is, and you guys know this, the number of times in the federal government that we found out 3 years in and 30 million in that it doesn't work is upsetting. We have to find out sooner if it doesn't work. We have to have that agile mindset. We have to understand that we're going to pay for results. And we have to have that decreased cycle time. And from the government perspective, we have to talk to the industry partners that support the mission. We can't say, here's your contract, see you in 6 months. No. You need to talk to the customer, you need to talk to the end user, and we have to provide and change the manner in which we administer contracts and award contracts in that fashion. And the last point, the 4th point, is focus on return on investment. You've heard here several times CIOs and acquisition folks say, don't talk to me about cost savings, because I don't know what that means. You don't give money back to the federal government, you don't give money back to the taxpayer. We get wrapped around the axle. And this loops into the first point, right, the innovative responses. If we can get away from, this is exactly how I want you to do a set of things for a set of time, and say, here is the result that I want. Here's where I want you to get me to. This is what success looks like. That's my ROI. That is a completely different set of conversations, and it's where we need to go in a lot of places. I'm not saying everywhere. Everybody talks about COBOL. I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Leave me alone. There's a lot of different ways that we can engender and create structures and processes that will allow us to become more and more efficient. That'll create that virtuous circle. Identify inefficiency, implement the efficiency, get better data, decrease processing time. Do it again. Do it again. They call it the virtuous circle, right? That's where we need to be. So within the Internal Revenue Service Office, the Chief Procurement Officer, the team set up an approach to take care of this. It's an actual approach. It's been awarded. Innovative responses to my problem. I mentioned $500 billion in obligations of services and contracts and goods. There's a central repository system for that called the Federal Procurement Data System Next Generation. We'll leave the next generation item alone. But it's the source of a lot of the data that Gavini, in the opening conversation here, referenced. The IRS's data in it is not the best in the world. And right now we do it as a manual process. So there are 57 fields that we enter for each of the 10 to 12,000 contract actions that we issue in a year. It's a lot of fields. And then here's the issue. Most of it's done manually, even if that information exists elsewhere. And then here's the other thing. If we make a mistake, we have to call up our contracting officers in the fourth quarter, where they do more than 40% of the obligations, more than 40% of their work occurs in the fourth quarter. Or even worse, we call them up in September, where 24% of our contract obligations exist, and say, hey, can you stop doing this work? I need you to correct this data field. That's a problem. That's my ROI, right? So I said 3 goals for this procurement. I want you to improve the IRS data in FPDS&G. I want you to limit manual work, and I want you to do it in 90 days. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that's it. That was the entire requirement statement. So this was a good thing and this was a bad thing, right? Government was like, what are we doing? And industry was like, what are you doing? They said, well, what do you want? I want you to fix my problem. I don't care. Fix my problem. Well, do you want technology? Do you want services? Do you want a bunch of interns in the back? I don't care. Fix my problem. Well, what about UiPath? What about R? What about Python? I don't care. Just fix my problem. Well, what if we need to demonstrate results? Great question. You got 1 month and you got $25,000 to show me what you got. If and only if you demonstrate results in that first month, you will give me a pitch at the end, 1 hour. And you get to convince me based on what you did and what you'll do for the next $50,000 in 2 months as to whether or not I'll fund you. Decrease cycle time. So the fact that we had a very brief requirement statement was awesome. The fact that we didn't have evaluation factors as you normally see them, corporate experience, subcontractor approach, key personnel, we didn't have it. There are no adjectival ratings, didn't have it. We said we'll evaluate you based on technical past performance and price relative to our goals, full stop. That was it. The response was 10 pages. All you got to do to convince me to get to the next phase is give me a 10-page proposal, and you'll get a 1-hour pitch to give to the federal government. The team did it in 21 days. So just to be clear, 21 business days, somebody gave me a hard time about that. I got it. 21 business days. But to be clear, we went from solicitation release, industry generated 10 pages of proposals. We evaluated the 10-page proposals. I know we're 20 minutes behind, so I'm trying to hurry up here. Evaluated the 10-page proposals, said, I want to listen and talk to you, whatever the number was of people, and you give me an hour pitch. And then we made the decision and we awarded the contracts in 21 days. That's quick. But again, the initial contract is not the only thing we're focusing on. So when we got to phase 2, we awarded 5 contracts, 5 people, 5 firms, got that $25K for the first 30 days. We had all 5 pitches for 1 hour on a Tuesday, I think it was. The team met and made a decision on Wednesday as to the 2 that they wanted to fund. And they issued the contract actions on the 3rd day. Cycle time. What are you going to do? How are you going to support my goals? I don't care. Fix my problem. And for those people, and there's been at least one argument about, well, does that mean that you wasted $75,000? You want me to point to wasting $75 million? Sorry. We're in meetings that cost more than that. Fix my problem. I don't care. And that's the agile mindset, right? And the focus on ROI was, from our perspective, we've got individuals, the most important asset that we have in the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer. We have individuals hand-jamming data away at a system. That's not what they're good at. That's not what they need to be doing. They need to be talking to their customer. They need to be talking to industry. They need to be finding out better ways to do things. Limit manual work. That was my ROI. So we didn't quite make the 90-day goal. It was 97 days. We've got multiple operational bots in FPDS&G that have reduced the time required to take those actions by 30%. We think that's going to go to 60 or 65%. The other thing we talked about was scale, right? So this is an IRS transaction. We specifically said within the solicitation that if it was successful, it would go to other bureaus within the within the Department of Treasury and other federal agencies. So the government doesn't have to do it again. So that industry sees, hey, this actually might scale. My bot might be $25,000 here and $50,000 here, but I can go up to $7 million. I'm willing to look at that. And this graphic, I think, is really telling. You can put it up on the screen. The importance of getting started relative to the value of finding the perfect investment. Suboptimal is not a bad thing. Don't tell me I shouldn't automate a broken process when I've got a person spending every single minute of their day putting data in during that broken process. Automate that broken process. Save that person 30% of their time and say, you're the expert. Now you fix the process because you have time to do it. Do it again. As soon as it became successful, we just talked about doing it again. So our challenges now become not, can we not do it? How come it's not possible to do it? Skunk Baxter talked about changing the narrative, and to be honest, I've had nightmares about radioactive Barbies and delta radiation, and I'm having some difficulty here. Change the narrative. It can be done. Suboptimal is not bad. Failure is not bad. And in fact, sometimes it's preferred, especially if it's short-term versus long-term. Risk. Your perceptions and definitions of risk. Am I willing to spend money in sort of this portfolio approach for information technology and emerging technology? We do it really well in the R&D space. We need to approach that within our internal projects and also within technology. Where are you willing to take risk? You're not always willing to take risk everywhere. IRS, there's a very easy issue. Taxpayer data. Got to be really, really careful with that. Publicly available data? Okay, we can go play there. Take the efficiencies gained and realized there and move to a slightly riskier or slightly more complex problem. Have that virtuous cycle, move ahead. The concept of organizational debt, I think, is really, really important. I'm sure a couple of folks have heard of Stephen Blank. His handle, his nickname, his moniker is the Godfather of Silicon Valley. He's widely considered as the father of lean startup methodology, which ironically is pretty consistent with Goldrat's theory of constraints. So I told you no procurement stuff, but I'll do management theory with you if you want. Organizational debt is the concept that if you've got too many people running around breaking things and trying different approaches and testing items, and you don't have anybody in the mid-range game, so to speak, it's what I call it. I'm a college basketball fan. You don't have anybody in the mid-range game saying, hey, what'd you learn? How'd you do that? We need to make sure that folks know what we're doing, how much we're spending. And if you don't have people in the long-range game, which is what is our strategy for this? What are we going to focus on? How does this affect our budget? Those three tiers, if they get out of balance, if you've got too many people just doing the same old, you're out of balance, the organization breaks. If you've got too many people pushing the envelope, if you've got 18 operational systems in your enterprise architecture, that's a problem too. Technical debt is very similar to organizational debt. We have to understand how ready our organizations are to actually take on these challenges. And incentives. A moderately intelligent CIO friend of mine once shared that, he's like, I would love to buy as-a-service models in a consumption-based model. That would be awesome. But here's the problem. My CFO and my chief financial officer tell me that's a violation of the Anti-Deficiency Act, and it's a violation of the bona fide need rule. Now, you don't have to know anything about government procurement or acquisition, but those very much bad. I think the technical term is no bueno. We don't want to do that. But the reality of the fact is one of the reasons why Margie Graves, again, great to have her here, the Modernizing Government Technology Act is so important is because it changes the funding stream. A lot of industry talks to us about the shift from CapEx into OpEx. It's all the same X, guys. It's all the same X. It's one-year money. But when you say, hey, if you set up a structure and a format for a return on investment and you can save money, I'll give that to you. And here's the kicker, it becomes multi-year funds. And when it becomes multi-year funds, then we in procurement can use multi-year contracting, which the 15-second version of it is, it will decrease the cost of capital to industry partners and firms who are looking to work with us. I've actually seen deal sheets where the APR to borrow money to support a government contract is worse than when my college sophomore wants to get a free t-shirt and signs up for a credit card. We spend $90 to $100 billion easy on IT. If you can affect the cost of money for the folks who do business with us by 0.5 point, as the kids say, that's an awful lot of cheddar. So I want to bring you back to, because I've got my 4 seconds. I'm not sure I'm going to get done in 4 seconds. But the final slide here, bring you back to what we talked about originally. Talked about how we can do innovative things within our current structure without changing it. How if you're looking to focus on the policy of procurement and acquisition and complaining about that, you're not all the way there. In fact, I would argue you're not there at all. What are the structures and the systems and the incentives for the people who make up those structures and systems? How is that functioning? And lastly, I talked to you a little bit about how IRS is approaching these issues. But I want to bring this back up. This is 150 years old. A century and a half ago, somebody did this, I guess it was with stylus and ink and parchment paper. Menard was not restricted by a piece of paper. Why do we think we need to be? Thank you for your time.